Welcome everyone to the August 21st meeting of the NSA Ad Hoc. Thank you all for being here. 6:03 p.m. I appreciate you all taking the time to join us. I have up on the screen a draft proposed agenda for our discussion tonight. What about a housekeeping or question? Some information sharing, discussion about what topic number 3 is, and then some discussion about around the questions that are at issue. How does this topic change culture? How or what might the department do to implement this topic? And what sources or experts do we need to bring to the table to present? I do want to take a little bit more time about next steps, especially because some questions came up at the end of our last meeting about where do we go from here, what is our work product going to be, and sort of how, who, and what are going to make the decisions. And so I may have us stop a little bit early on the discussion, depending on how it goes, to talk about what our next steps are. Questions, anyone?
Jesse, Commissioner Shea, could you make the screen a little bit bigger, please?
Yeah, of course. Let me see what
Thank
I can
you.
do.
It's for Jose Dorado's sake.
Yes, yes. Okay. Start off the meeting with what's kind of a very big question, actually, which is considering the role of federal oversight in law enforcement. If you could invite any historical figure to join a discussion on improving police-community relations at the national level, who would it be and why? See, Jose is volunteering to start us off.
Yeah, back in 2015, Barack Obama commissioned a task force on 21st century policing, and I don't remember the chair's name, but there was a whole lot of really influential and powerful people that were involved in that task force, and they went all around the country and basically did listening sessions. So my answer to that question would be those people, maybe the chair of that task force, and their perspective collectively on the work that they did and how that compares to conditions of today. But certainly they discussed in any number of venues culture change.
Thank you. That's a good one. Oh. I have to do some technical trying to get someone on. Can I just call on somebody? About DC Wong is the next one on my list.
Actually, I was following up on what you just said about the 21st century policing and looking at the list of people actually on the task force. So, but they appear to mostly be actual law enforcement executives and some professors. I don't know if that's what we were looking for as far as speakers or subject matter experts. for our purposes here?
Since it's historical, I didn't write the question, but since it's historical figures, I think it's just sort of in the mold or who you might think of or would be interesting to have that conversation about.
Okay. Well, let me look at that for a second. Come back to me.
I can go next. I have a lot of young kids and a very wild imagination. I think I would invite General Harriet Tubman back to the table, since modern day policing is derived from slave patrols, and that's not a pretty history to have and to be associated with. I'd be curious of what somebody who is like such a revolutionary, figure in supporting and freeing enslaved people what her 2 cents would be on what it looks like today.
You say sergeant?
General
General, there it
Harriet
is.
Tubman.
Thank you. I will suggest, I know that I don't remember the person's name, but there is someone who is attributed locally to starting or beginning the first modern day police force in, I think it was Berkeley, California. It was the chief of the Berkeley Police Department way back. I don't remember, and I don't recall the name or the time period. But being one of the first police forces in the country, formal police forces, I think it'd be an interesting conversation about why they were set up, what the purpose was.
His name is August Vollmer.
There it is. I thought that someone
They
veteran of our
named it,
PPD
they
may know.
named a peak after him in Berkeley. Vollmer Peak, Vollmer, Peak. He's
Thank you.
credited with investing in the idea of polygraph examination. He's noted for that. But other than that, he nothing they did in Berkeley, having worked there 20 years, nothing he did at that time would do any good for what we're trying to do here, what I think we're trying to do here. I mean, he believed in a professional police department. He believed in ethics. I would give him that credit, but women couldn't be in the police department, nobody of color. Blacks had to stay in a certain area in West Berkeley. So that's the full picture of August Vollmer. And then he left and committed suicide in Seattle.
Much appreciated. DC Wong?
Along that lines, actually, when you said that, I was thinking about what we consider I guess, the father of modern policing, which was Sir Robert Peel in the London police force. But as Chief Lyleser said, it has similar issues where I guess the era of policing back then was not what we want to see today. So that may not be the best choice. Although, if we had him around, we could ask what his original intent was as far as crime fighting and community service goes, but maybe the methodology would be a little different these days.
Going around. Mariana?
Yeah, I was really trying to. So I have two. One, I'm just gonna. I believe I don't remember his last name, but there was a young Chicano named Benny when I was I don't know, I guess I was 14 or 15 in Los Angeles, and he was incarcerated at the sheriff's one of the sheriff jails in East Los Angeles. and it was a regular car auto stop, and they found this, that, and the other, and he was incarcerated. And then his family and the community found out that he committed suicide, and that just wasn't true. And I remember, I don't know, there must have been 2,000 of us who went to the site, and there was a 10-foot cyclone fence between the parking lot and where the sheriffs parked their vehicles, and then the holding cells. And all of us grabbed onto that cyclone fence and were yelling and screaming and protesting. And all of a sudden, that cyclone fence came out of the asphalt. And I was so impressed of the power of people protesting. So I would invite Benny, and I would invite everyone who participated in that protest to have a sit-down discussion right now with, what happened then and what has happened up until now, and why there's federal oversight, why it's necessary to have civilian oversight. So that would be my invitation. Thank you.
That's a good one. Thank you. Lieutenant Hubbard?
One of the historical chiefs, Charles Ramsey, he was the chief of DC and Philadelphia. And he is rich with wisdom, and I recommend listening to his TED Talk. He did an amazing job with that, but that's one. I met him, but he's one I can listen to all day, but certainly very progressive mindset, been in law enforcement for many years, who can still a lot of value to this day.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Hubbard, what was his name again?
Charles Ramsey.
Thank you.
Reggie?
Huey Newton, Bobby Seals. Bobby Seals is still alive, so.
Did I miss anybody?
Also, when
She has the privilege of taking notes, so I'm not asking her to do that input. Okay. Appreciate everyone's thoughts. Thank you. So I want to turn to, excuse me, I want to turn to the topic at hand for today's discussion. This particular topic, I think, came up organically throughout our discussions across the last 2 weeks. It was something that the commissioners, myself and Chair Malele, did want to hone in on and have a discussion about as well. Unfortunately, Chair Malele could not be here tonight. And so I think we'll just focus on the sort of organic discussion that occurred about what happened, why, and why this particular piece is important. This particular topic focuses specifically on low to mid-level managers. We're thinking our sergeants, our lieutenants. It could go as low as the field training officers, and about what we do to teach them, train them, drill into them, whatever it might be, ethical leadership and management skills, specifically in a way that translates to culture change in the department. I think that from line discussions with the chair where she sees this particular topic focusing on is when sergeants are promoted, when sergeants become, or sorry, when officers are promoted to sergeant, or sergeants are promoted to the next step. I think is it lieutenant, captain? I would to help with the transition to an actual supervisor, an actual manager, as opposed to just another one of the officers, another one of the lines just happens to be making decisions. So that what is instilled in those particular sergeants and what is instilled in those particular managers or trainers even is the importance of ethical leadership, the importance of ethical management, and sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Instilling that among to the younger members of the department, or instilling that in all the members of the department that they may oversee. Reggie, you, I think, had a point about it during 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the importance of the sergeants, the field training officers, and what they are sort of doing in their instilling of culture to younger members. Thank you. Younger members of the department. Could you help us remember or talk a little bit more about what it was you meant, your experience there?
Well, in police agencies, the culture is maintained and reinforced and protected by employees from, I would say, 4 years to 11 years. That's where the culture is driven and protected and guarded, etc. So if you want to change, let's start with sergeants, which is probably the most important rank in policing, and probably the most difficult rank in policing. So if you want to get quality sergeants, they have to have established themselves as being ethical people before, before you look at them as candidates, and that means they have to be tested, and we understand all that transactional testing, but we're talking about ethics here. So how do we? I mean, knowing the penal code, knowing the general orders, and all of that kind of stuff, that's transactional. The ethics, is of a potential sergeant comes out in what that individual officer has demonstrated. And so it's that person, his or her evaluations, the kind of work that assignments they've done. I would say their sick time usage. Have they been involved in personnel complaints, and if so, what kinds, and why? Even if they were found not responsible or responsible, I would want to know what kind of allegations are being said about them and why. So how would you test find those, after you're looking at those things? Then the testing, you would have to develop the kind of questions on the sergeant's examination that are in line with the kind of culture that you want to establish. So if we were to decide that we wanted, and I'm just taking this one situation, we wanted to say, we really want to, there's no tolerance for prevarication, for lying on a police report, then those questions have to be in every examination that a person takes if they want to be an FTO, if they want to be a dog handler, if they want to be a homicide investigator, robbery investigator. You would have these questions over and over and over. So the person moving up the ranks knows that this is the body of information that they have to master, that this is what the department values. This is the culture that the department is trying to establish. And I would want everybody to get it right. I would want everybody to get it right, and knowing that you're going to face these questions over and over and over. And then it takes a time, people then grow to it. Then you only promote the folks who do well on those kind of examinations, and then they'll be confronted with these kind of questions in their oral interviews and etc. So folks know that, look, if I want to do well in this department, I got to understand that, number one, veracity is important. There's no tolerance for falsifying a police report. And so that's an example of what you would do. And it would take time that's like a seed being planted in the ground, and it takes time for the culture to shift to what we are, what we want. So I guess that's the best way I can explain it to folks who have never been in law enforcement. But I know these guys that are on this call know what I'm talking about. If you want to establish a change of direction, you got to first say what we are now, presently. Say where we want to go, the values we want to go. Attach some discipline to those who do not adhere to those values. And of course, attach some rewards for those who do, which would be promotionals and various assignments that you get, that they would want. If they want to ride the motorcycle, they got to get the same kind of questionings. You know, every assignment, lateral and promotional. And then a couple of weeks ago, it was said in one of these sessions that, you know, how do we, this is a different ad hoc. It was about community policing and how do we make sure people stay in community policing. And then a quip was made that, you know, well, if they don't want to stay in community policing, we'll put them back to patrol. Like patrol is a punishment. Patrol has to be thought of as a special assignment. If you want to change the quality of the way Oakland Police Department serves its community, patrol has to be number one, not homicide, not narcotics, not IAB or IAD. It has to be patrol. And if you do well in patrol, then that's where we're looking for the people to promote. That's how you change culture. But OPD's patrol cannot be thought of as, I don't want to be there. No, it's got to be where we want our best people. I hope I made myself clear.
Mariano?
Yeah, so thank you for that, Reggie. So it seems to be that, you know, with these questions or advances, you know, you have to meet this, you know, standard. But how are these standards and who evaluates these standards? Well, you know, the ethics,
yes.
You know.
I know for a fact that Post already has done this kind of work. You know, anybody who's promoting, you got to know this kind of stuff. You got to know culture. You got to know ethics. You got to know everything about management. So Post has that kind of training. But I'm just saying that the staff, the chief of police, the DCs, my lieutenants, I want to know where do you think we need to improve, and how should we get there? What ethics do we need to improve upon? What is our worst ethics? We have to face these things and confront them and then make the change. And then, like I said, a structural thing I would do would be like have a department-wide, maybe a couple of weeks, department-wide training on these ethical changes that we want that everybody has to display if you want to be an Oakland Police Department officer. Now, some people are going to complain. We know that. Some people are going to leave. We know that. And if they do, goodbye. See you later. We only want people here who wants to adhere to the values that the community deem are important and what most professionals think are important. And lying, for example, I said lying on a police report is the most egregious thing that you can do. And I'm saddened to say that if we look across law enforcement across the nation, you look at Memphis, you look at Mississippi, it's all over the place. It's just this attitude that the facts don't matter. Only thing that matter is power. And that's not good. If you look at Antioch, Vallejo, Pittsburgh, not good. Now, it's hard to hear, and it's hard for me to even say. I take no pleasure in this. It's hard for me to even say, but these are the facts. I don't know how anybody can deny it.
Mariano, you posed a question about who's creating the standards, but that's an open question, right? With community oversight in place, what, if any, standards would you have in place for, as we're talking about here, screening for hiring, promotion of, candidates for sergeant, lieutenant, field training officer, whatever it might be?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first and foremost that I would look for is, truthfulness and cover-ups. Just, no cover-ups. You need to tell the truth. If you don't, then, don't cover it up. But the question is, so yeah, you can ask these, or you can tell a recruit or someone who's looking for a promotion that, these are our ethics. We will not tolerate cover-ups. You need to be truthful. But so how do you present that as the truth, as a true ethics standard when if and when this is not taking place? And I know that we're talking hypotheticals, but let's talk some real examples. Let's take, for instance, this officer who got into an accident in San Francisco, and he didn't report it to anyone. Went about his business, and then all of a sudden, an insurance company got a hold of OPD, and and then everything started rolling. And then someone, and I forget who, but and maybe it was an investigator, recommended or advised that, look, why don't you just report the accident? Because otherwise it'll be a criminal act. And so if you report the accident, then it's an accident. So it started there, you know, so, and then I'll stop there, but then, so now a month later, you have, you know, several officers who are applying for sergeants. And so, you know, you have this standard of ethics. You must tell the truth. You can't do cover-ups. And so they said, sure, I will tell the truth. I will swear to, you know, be truthful. And so you have the reality that just took place, and then you have the department activities and shenanigans, for lack of a better word. You know, so how do you bring all that together and make sure that it isn't just words or on paper? You know, that's my whole dilemma. Thank you.
Perhaps I can tap one of our department representatives to talk a little bit about what it is that the department is currently doing.
Sure. I was gonna say that those standards that we're talking about are in place, right? As far as truthfulness and false police reports, which we call reports and bookings, you can see those on the discipline matrix, and it's already terminable offenses. If you're found to be lying, excluding information, false information, it's a terminable offense. And we just recently did that. And the case you're talking about is the same thing. The question comes down to, now we have this in place, but how do we ensure that it's reinforced and that every employee understands that that is the consequence, so they don't even get there? I mean, it's not very common that it happens, but you know, we're always looking for new ways and suggestions to reinforce the idea that, you know, tell the truth, and the punishment for whatever you did is whatever you did. But if you lie, you will be terminated. And we do it. We just want ways to, I guess, make it stick better, for the lack of a better term. So we're open to suggestions as far as that goes.
Before I turn to Lieutenant Hubbard and ask him, I heard that you said that the reports and bookings is something new. Did I hear you right, or did I mishear? You're on mute, so I didn't hear your answer.
Sorry, I'm late.
No
Hello,
worries.
everybody.
Glad to have you. Just in the middle of a chat about our discussion. It's not
I'll answer
discussion.
the question. No, reports
Yeah.
and bookings, that's been in the discipline matrix since as long as I've been here, so it's not new.
Thank you. We're just having a discussion about, well, what are the standards for screening for candidates that screening for sergeant candidates or promotional candidates, based off of discussion that we had and some information from Reggie, who said we need to screen for these candidates. We need to ask them about these candidates. It needs to be in each of the promotional tests. It needs to be asked about. And right now we're figuring out, well, how is the department, the standard is there. The question is, how do you screen? How do you train? How do you take that? Focusing, of course, right now on sergeants and how we get sergeants to get either screened for that, screening for ethical candidates, or for sergeants to be able to instill that into the members of the department, which is why we're so lucky to have Lieutenant Hubbard, but DC Wong put his hand up. What's up?
As you're talking about the screening process, that suddenly reminded me of during the promotional process, there is an interview that comes after all the regular written and oral board tests. And it's an additional interview with a community member, a member of the department. And there's always going to be an ethics question on there. And, obviously the person testing is not going to say anything completely unethical, but you do get a sense sometimes if they're willing to make that judgment call, if they're willing to be a supervisor and to make the hard call. And you can tell if they're ready for it, or sometimes they're sort of wavering. And we actually weigh that quite heavily, whether they're ready to be promoted or not. But that also brings up what Reggie was saying, which is like a great idea to actually take those same kind of questions instead of only having them on promotional tests, to use them in all types of tests for transfers and special assignments, so that this topic becomes, I guess, prevalent in everything we do, as opposed instead of just waiting for a promotional test. So we're definitely going to take that back and consider inserting that into the different testing processes.
What is the question you ask? Or do you have like a general area or an example?
A lot of times the questions will be related to some behavior, like say, I think the last question on the sergeant's one was an officer is caught for DUI, outside the city of Oakland, and you're the watch commander and you get called. What is your response? And then those that, well, I might, do this and I might do that, and they're not ready. But those individuals that know exactly what to do, how to report it, how to, contact their authorities and do all that, they're ready for, they show the maturity as supervisors to make that hard call and to move up. So that was the most recent question.
Rihanna?
Yes, and then is there the persons that the officers asking the question, are they trained to pick up on the answers and the nuances, and what kind of training do they go through?
You're talking about the screeners, the sergeant?
Yes.
Just clarify.
Yes.
There's no particular training, but generally we will always use somebody that's at least one or maybe two ranks above the rank they're promoting into. So the understanding would be that we already know, hopefully, what the right answer and right, I guess, perspective is before they answer that question. And so a lot of times when they say it and you can tell they're not quite ready, it's pretty obvious to somebody that's already done that job for some time.
There is a code of ethics, and in policing, IACP developed a code of ethics that is kind of like a boilerplate. It's like a pledge, and it covers how the qualities and the values that every person in law enforcement should have and exhibit. That kind of thing can be put on every lateral, like I said, every lateral movement, every promotional, and etc. So it becomes a rope. You want it to become a common statement that everybody pays attention to, and that if they want to get what they want to get, they got to parrot this. And over time, it seeps in. It becomes the standard. Secondly, you probably find more about an ethical person's values through the oral interviews, and to ask the hard questions of a person. I agree with what DC Wong saying. They're just not ready yet. If they don't get it, if they don't see the value in it. And then you have to, that's one dynamic. The other dynamic, you got to get your lieutenants and your sergeants together and train them up on doing their evaluations. And you want to ask the questions on evaluations about ethics. What is your opinion of Officer Lyles? Is he a truth teller? We don't assume that Officer Lyles is a truth teller. I'm asking you, is Officer Lyles a truth teller? Does he show up to work when he's supposed to? Have you had any episodes where there was falsification on the police report, etc.? These are the kind of hard questions that you have to put to existing sergeants who are reviewing officers who want to become sergeants or want to become FTOs. And so by doing this, people gonna, like I said, people gonna resist it initially, but if you stick with it over time, it will become natural. And these are the tough questions we want to know. Nobody wants to lie on a police report, because if somebody said they did, then they may lower the trajectory of their career. That's the only thing we have. I don't know of anything else that we have other than their job, and if they want to do something different in their career, or they want to promote in their career. And if you want to do that, then you got to be a truth teller. But it's not just, I just use that as an example. That IACP code of ethics is worth all of us reading, and then we'll get a better handle on the values that all law enforcement should employ.
Thank you. Jose?
Yeah, it would seem to me that it would be valuable to have the whole process of evaluating candidates for sergeants and lieutenants to go out to the community and ask them what has been their experience
I agree with that.
officer. Have they shown the community respect, and to what degree? Have they listened to people that they've had contact with? Have they been fair and ethical in their demeanor, in their contact with the contacts with the community? And what does the community think of this officer? Do they feel as though they actually care about the job they do and the people that they serve? So it would seem to me that that canon should be an important element in determining who is a good candidate for promotion, particularly if you're talking about culture change and ethics, because these are the kinds of officers that we want, I would think, to see advance, are those that in fact embody that culture change that is demonstrated on a day-to-day basis when they're out on the street. And who knows that better than the community that they come into contact with? Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a powerful word, care. I would add to that you don't just get the the business manager who lives up on Skyline Boulevard to talk about the police officer, OPD sergeant, whatever. But you got to get the person who lives on 56 and Market to also be part of that conversation. 86 and D Street. They got to be able to be asked and play a role on what's happening, because some of us have an opinion of law enforcement based on how they interface with us, and you haven't never had an interface with them. You just never had an interface with them. So you have an image or what you think policing is about, but policing is different, and it's not cookie cutter in every part of the community, and it has some social economic dynamics to it. So you need to get folks all over the community standing and saying, I know this guy, you know, he's a good guy, or she's a great officer, and these are the reasons why. And if you hear that across town from people from all areas of town, then you got a good candidate to be promoted. But it starts once we get this, whatever what we're trying to get together here for sergeants, you gotta put that and do the same thing for entry officers. And then the same thing for FTOs. And the same thing for folks who want to lateral places, and for sergeants and for lieutenants. Then it becomes a standard throughout the department. Now, DC Wong said, well, if somebody lies on a police report, they're going to be terminated. We don't think that. You can find a lot of people in Oakland think that's not true. I mean, and it's based on these cases I was trying to talk about last week. You got case after case after case that are horrible cases that people have not been truthful. And then we also have, you know, the judge, like I said it many times before, saying what he said. Judge Orrick.
Can I take a moment to ask just a few questions of our department representatives, just so I can flesh out some potential parts of the process that might be helpful. Sorry, Reggie, to sort of detour us a little bit. What, if anything, is given to officers to help them prepare for a sergeant's exam? Or what, if any, training materials is out there?
As part of the job announcement, which is actually public, you can actually look those up. It talks about, you know, the usual job dimensions and description and duties. But there's the reading list, and the reading list will always contain obviously policy, but also books about leadership and articles. And you know, the 21st Century Policing report is or maybe is still one of the reading materials. There's materials on ethics. There's materials on community policing. There's materials. It depends on that particular testing cycle and what the subject matter experts worked out with the testing company. But that's what they're given. That's what they read, and then the test questions for the written will be based upon those. And then there's the oral boards that consist of several panels. You know, one's usually like a squad meeting, you know, like a supervisory type environment. One will be like a mock community meeting, and then one will be a tactical situation. And those are moderated and judged by higher level ranked officers from outside the department. Like if you're testing for sergeant, it'll usually be at least a lieutenant or a captain doing it, and so forth. So that's the testing process. The department internally adds in that interview I was telling you about earlier that's done by a higher rank person from the department as well as community member. And when you get to the higher levels, such as lieutenant and above, you will actually be required to write essays. Sometimes one of them being your experience with community involvement and other topics such as that. So there's quite a lot in the testing process, but we are always looking for ways to add more to it.
But are the announcements public or able to be shared?
Yes, they should normally be posted on the city's website. It's just that obviously they'd be restricted to current members of the department, but they're still posted. I could look up and see if I can get the most recent one for you and distribute it to the group.
Please, thank you. And then for sorry, along those same lines, after someone is actually promoted to a sergeant, what if any leadership at the leadership management training is given within that first year or two?
Thank you for the question. I'll go ahead and answer that. There's three significant things that we do. The first one, we have an in-house transition course, and that has leadership and ethics component to it. It's interwoven, but definitely a standalone class also. So that's 40 hours. They also have to attend an 80-hour, and this is all online, and I can send you the curriculum also for what we have, an 80-hour post-supervisory course, and that has a very robust course on ethics. We started this about 3 years ago, but we also have a mentorship program where a sergeant is paired up with another sergeant who agreed to be their mentor. And not everyone is selected. And they get to experience different parts of the city. We try to do different watches also, just to get used to the nightlife and the day life as a sergeant. But they usually are with that mentor for about 30 days. And within that, there's a lot of sub training that occurs. It's not just what you do in patrol, but we ask them to invite them to internal affairs meeting or go to a force review board, so they get different aspects of leadership expectations that we have here.
Sorry, just taking some notes. Jose, you're on mute.
Lieutenant Hubbard, is there any part of that mentorship that involves going and talking to community members? You said that they take them to different parts of the city. And I don't know how that works, but it would seem to me, again, in alignment with what I was saying previously, that it would be valuable for the mentor to, particularly if they're familiar with community folks, taking them and introducing them to particular folks in the community to see if, in fact, there is any sort of rapport that the candidate demonstrates with different community members in different scenarios. So, is there anything along those lines that happens in that mentorship program? Let's call it.
Yes, sir. We have it where we want them to attend as many community meetings as possible, but also just evaluation of their overall interaction with the community. Funny that you mentioned that. As I mentioned the first time I met you all a couple weeks ago, I mentioned Project Reset, and one of the things that keeps coming up are officers and sergeants who want to attend more community meetings, but because of COVID, we kind of went away from that in the department. We used to require it every quarter. An officer, squad, watch commander would have to go to a community meeting, and we stopped tracking that. So we had a meeting with the chief, and he asked Deputy Chief Beard to get that rolling again. Hopefully, I don't even know if we're still holding regular community meetings because of COVID, but I'm hoping that those start picking up again. So there's plenty of opportunity for not only officers and sergeants to attend, but also use that time to solicit feedback from them on their experience with their their police officers.
Well, I can assure you there's any number of neighborhood councils that, like mine in Maxwell Park, that are meeting on a regular basis.
Good.
Even though many of them are still by Zoom, but
Yeah.
I think slowly we're transitioning to personal or hybrid meetings.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that. You should start seeing more involvement. That was a commitment that the chief gave me last week.
Thank you.
We named a few pathways forward, and I think I'm really appreciative of Reggie and Mariano and Jose for offering some of those pathways forward. What I'm hearing from DC Wong and Lieutenant Hubbard is that there is already a standard of ethics. There are already so many things being done. So what are pathways forward that you think you can implement and it will be transformative for your department, for your agency?
Yeah, I'll name one. Thank you for the question. And people who know me well, I often say this. We sometimes get trapped in the vortex of regular police training, and we're used to it. We're used to the post standards. A lot of it can be repetitive. What I think we fail as in law enforcement is we don't debrief incidents that happen across the nation. Like, we as an Oakland Police Department never really had a real conversation about Memphis. You hear talk about what's going on in Antioch, but there's no, okay, Oakland, let's really have a real talk about this as a police department. And I think keeping up with common trends and having real conversations, I think, are essential for us and the new officers coming in, so they have context and they know where we stand on it and why we would not allow that to happen here. I think the same thing happens in the business world and political world also, is like we failed to learn from our mistakes.
I think in Oakland too, I'm curious because there's a lot just right at home that you can debrief on. Do you have a process of debriefing the issues in Oakland with your officers?
We do, and what we usually, when we have an incident, I know it was mentioned earlier, the incident that happened in San Francisco, new policies and procedures are being implemented because of that, and that's where that conversation occurs, and those debriefs occur. A lot of what happens here, though, is delayed significantly because there may be an investigation going. So that's why I like to use examples outside of Oakland that we can jump on immediately and have a conversation about.
And my last question is, two or three of the recommendations offered community oversight, because this is, about the NSA oversight, how to continue some type of community involvement after NSA is done. It includes, evaluate ethical questions and review at, more junction points than the current set. It also offers more community input and any lateral or, promotions internally. How feasible is that for you all to implement?
We already have a component of that. So after the civil service promotional exam is completed and before one is promoted, they have to go through a community panel. It's usually made up of one of our deputy chiefs, one of our professional staff, and a member from our commission, but that they obviously can give it to anyone. So that's already in place. But what I like to offer, since I have some control over this, is we regularly test for field training officers. And it's an exam that we create internally. I don't have to get post approval, if you will, on developing that test, but I would love it for you all or individuals that you select to help me write those questions. And we do have, it's really heavy on ethics, real ethics, scenario-based ethics, and we use that as a tool to select our field training officers, which I'll echo what Reggie said. I totally agree that sergeants are most important, and the second most important people we have here are our field training officers and our recruit training officers. So I want to make sure we get the best.
I'm kind of concerned because, Reggie named and some of the community members here named some offerings, and it sounds like you already have, are already doing it, or it feels like there are many layers in place to some of your processes for promotion and for ensuring there's some ethics within, folks as they get promoted. And yet we're still hearing what Mariano mentioned and what Reggie mentioned. We still know as community members that there are a bunch of folks who are getting by, who lie and cheat and have, unethical behaviors like calling people racial slurs or calling women certain things. How does it change then?
If I'm hearing you correctly, I think we can obviously do a better job communicating with the public on what we do when we get allegations. I'll just use, a racial connotation, assuring the public that we have a process in place that immediately launches an investigation and deals with that situation. But also, and we had this conversation earlier today in a meeting about the outcome. I think we also sometimes fail on explaining to the community what the outcome of that investigation is and how we explain that. I think that's essential. I know we're talking about sensitive issues here because they are internal investigations, but I see no wrong in at least saying there is an investigation if there's ever a question on it.
Let's see. I think Reggie got his hand up before you did, Mariano. So
Yeah, I want to thank Nikki for her line of questioning. Refreshing, right on point. OPD has not admitted that they are not doing a good job. They think that they have the policy, and the people that I run around with don't do that kind of bad stuff. And the majority of us follow the law and follow the general orders, etc. But that 15% or 10% or 8%, whatever you want to call it, they just have no handle on dealing with that. They can't even admit it. It's almost like if you admit it, that somehow you're a traitor. And so what happens is when these ugly things happen, they immediately forget them. Or if somebody comes in who's a subject matter expert and does a study and says, here's a 58-page study, here's a 200-page study, here's a 2-year review of your agency. It's read, if it's read at all, and then forgotten. And so there's where the problem is. How do we get Oakland Police Department to admit, look, this pain I have in my side is not just pain, it's cancer. And I need to go to someone who's a cancer specialist to look at me. And I'm using that as a metaphor. It's serious. It's deadly. And then lastly, Jesse, in your notes, or whoever's taking the notes, don't just put Memphis and Antioch, put Mississippi in there too, because that's probably the most egregious one in the nation, where a group of officers, special officers, broke into 2 Black men's homes, tortured them, sexually assaulted them, put a gun in their mouth, shot one of them in the face, and then went and lied on the reports, and ultimately are caught up and have went to court and confessed, yes, they did that. 6 officers, 5 from one department and 1 from a neighboring department. This is the kind of thing that's happening in law, and the only way law enforcement can get their hands around it, they don't need activists telling them that something's wrong. If you got that badge on and you're a captain, lieutenant, sergeant, you should be saying something is wrong. And I'm going to tell you who's doing it. It's this clique over here. I used to have my name written in the bathroom with all kind of ugly things because they knew I wasn't taking no mess. And we're not going to be your friend. I'm not looking for friends. I'm trying to serve the public. You should be doing the same thing. You know, we're not going to invite you to the party. I got a wife and a family and you know, and friends. I know this sounds like it's ridiculous and not important, but it's the most important thing. Sergeants can't be buddy pals with the people they're supervising. They have to supervise them. Lieutenant Hubbard knows this. DC Wong knows this. And if you can't make the hard call, you shouldn't be an FTO. You shouldn't be a supervisor. But before we can do anything about cultural shift, we have to admit we need to shift. I'm done.
Ariana?
Yeah, I just want to, just for the record, just state that, you know, I appreciate Lieutenant Hubbard and DC Clifford Wong, you know, being part of this honest and, you know, probably difficult conversation for you folks. So I just want to state that and make sure that, you know that, you know, this is also difficult for us. And raising this, that we're not seeing you as a whipping post, or, you know, we're having an honest conversation. And I hope you see it that in the same manner. You know, because at the end of the day, it's going to be this conversation that includes your opinions and your viewpoints, you know, that are going to produce a report. You know, when I hear, you know, that because this happened, that happened, there's new policies. When I hear, you know, we're better than last year, or we could do better, you know, I just can't help but think that, you know, in corporate America and the corporate business, that would not stand, that kind of standard, it would not be tolerated. You know, middle management would be fired, replaced, you know, moved along, you know, because their standards and ethics are whatever it is, that standard and ethic is fixed and they follow it, you know. And so the standard and ethics that OPD has, you know, on paper or verbally, you know, should be the same. And so, you know, I believe that, you know, if we get to that point, you know, we can really make some true changes. You know, one question that comes up that could possibly be used during an evaluation is, you know, I don't know if you can ask someone, you know, what's your ideology, or what's your mental capacity, you know, or what's your well-being. But one question you can ask is, you know, what drives you, Officer Bob, or Officer Sally, what drives you as an OPD officer? Simple question like that, you know, every day. Thank you.
I saw you on mute. Go for it. Reggie.
Okay, I had it in the chat of six areas that are critical, I think, and I'm not looking for everybody to agree with me, and you can disagree. But officers off-duty life, necessary force, acting impartially, profiling, de-escalation, and the last thing I would say is ignoring negative behavior, or ignoring recommendations of corrective how to correct the department. So if we can get our hands around 3 or 4 of those, I think we would be really focusing in on the values of the police department. How you act off duty, you know, are you hanging around with the Hells Angels, or are you a Boy Scout leader? Are you a coach of basketball, or you know, that's important. Have you got a lot of complaints about you know, unnecessary force, too much force? Do you have any implicit bias or overt bias? Have you been accused of profiling people? Do you have any attitudes about that? Are you known to de-escalate a situation? These are supervisors now. And lastly, you know, how do you take your criticism? I mean, how do you take criticism about your negative behavior? How do you take criticism about people on your squad's negative behavior? And what do you do about it?
Thank you, Reg. Those are helpful areas to sort of think about around this particular discussion. DC Wong.
I was just going to go back and touch on what Mariana said about the corporate culture and the corporate standards. And Lieutenant Hubbard and I were actually talking about that earlier, and we had a short conversation with Chairman Laley the other day. That, you know, as the police department and as a government agency, we stick with the same trainings and the same, you know, same curriculum that's been used year after year. But sometimes, you know, governments, they change slowly, and corporations, companies, private entities have more resources and the ability to have better training. So we're actually looking to see if we can get either more, I guess you could say, corporate training or academic training that's outside of the regular realm of what we've been used to all these years, to hopefully break out of this mold, to try something new, something different, to change the culture. I mean, as we said earlier, we have policies and procedures and metrics that cover pretty much everything we've talked about, right? You know, we talk about too much force. We have personal assessment that tracks force. And if you have too much from your peer group, you'll pop up and we'll review you. If you talked about bias, we have our stop data that tracks who you stopped and why you stopped them and whether you searched them or not. All that's there. But it comes down to changing the actual culture of the organization is not as simple. And I think we need to look at something different. And I know Lieutenant Hubbard just came back from training of the Police Executive Research Forum, and I went to the same last year. And they would bring in professors of business and different organizations from Harvard and MIT, Boston University. Quite interesting, quite informative, and quite different than what we're used to getting out of post-training. So that's something we're looking at, and open to any ideas, training courses that you think might help us. And of course, any funding to pay for these, because we've tried it before and it's quite expensive too. But I just wanted to add that in.
It's really hard to hear about the financial issues because I'm from a nonprofit and this is a $700+ million agency I'm talking to. And you all get, I think this was mentioned before too, from one of the community members, you know, the lawsuits and the liabilities that the the department has to deal with is in surplus of probably what you want to spend every year, and probably, you know, and so it still goes back to this: how do you get a ethical, you know, force maybe that mirrors more of you, DC Wong and Lieutenant Hubbard? You know, I know you aren't the ones that we're talking about here, but those are the ones that cost the most on your force. And if there's no intentionality of calling a cancer and weeding out those liabilities that are costing you millions of dollars in lawsuits every year, you would actually have some of those fundings freed up for these trainings that you'd like, and that might help you have more transformative culture
Well
shifts in
said.
your agency. So it's really hard to hear you say that to me, because we know that you, despite so many agencies in Oakland, and I'm talking from a parent's perspective here, my kids don't have access to a lot of things right now because of the budget cuts. The police department actually gained money. So I'm still curious of what is an effective next step for us to consider as we write up, some of our deep dives for the oversight, process. We're naming a lot of great ideas and naming, ins and outs of like what could happen and what to pay attention to. But what I keep hearing is there's not enough funding, or we already do enough stuff. So what does change? Like, do you see that there's a problem?
That's the question.
Yeah, I want to just qualify as the mayor, city council, chief been very generous with their budget, especially for training. I think what we're trying to convey is we want to take it to the next level. And there's a lot of great training out there that I think would be unexpected for most officers, employees in general. And I think that's what we want. I talked about Goldman. We sent 10 of our officers to Goldman, and it was a few months of training, but it cost $80,000. It was really expensive, but it was one of the best things that we ever did. I want to do that again. I just want to look for more clever ways of paying for it, and maybe getting some of the local universities to volunteer at their time.
Can I say something? This is complimentary of Oakland Police Department. And it was an ugly case that went down in Philadelphia 3 or 4 days ago, where a man was shot and killed, and the police officers in Philadelphia lied on the police report, lied about the death. But former police captain Danielle Outlaw, who is the chief of police of Philadelphia now, she gets on TV and says, he lied. That was not the truth. We're looking into it, and etc. And she came up and said, now she was a former OPD captain, right? Came up through the ranks. That kind of individual like Danielle Outlaw, Lieutenant Hubbard, Clifford Wong, are not the problem. The problem is with what I'm saying is 8%, 15%, whatever it is. What are we doing about them? Do you know that they exist? Do you know who they are? Do you know the crazies in your locker room? Do you know the ones? Tell me how many cliques do we have in this department? Do we have any fascists in the department? That's the kind of questions you need to be asking yourselves. You don't have to say nothing now. And you guys, like Mariano said, you guys are the solution. You're not the problem. Trust me. I mean, no disrespect to you. But these are the kind of questions we have to focus our attention on, the very people who are creating the problem. But you can't think that these problem creators don't exist because we haven't had an incident yet. You got to know that they're there. What are you doing to ferret them out? What are you doing to discover who they may be? Are there any gangs in the OPD? Well, the new LA County Sheriff, he admitted that, yeah, and I'm doing everything I can to get rid of them. So this is the kind of introspective work we need. and it's hard. It's very hard. But if this is our one chance. If we dismiss it, then we'll be here. I won't be. We'll be here 20 years from now talking about the same stuff.
Can I take Mariano?
Yeah, Commissioner Shea, and thank you. I know you probably want to wrap this up, but so you know, the whole concept of buy-in, that's so important. You know, I think everyone has to buy in, you know, to the degree that, you know, DC Wong and Lieutenant Hubbard, you know, are buying in. When Lieutenant Hubbard mentioned the trainings that you all attended, and you wish, you know, you could have more funding for that. How do you evaluate that standard, and how do you implement it so that it's measurable and that it works? It's not just, you know, a pamphlet, you know, but so that how do you in turn, you know, tell your officers, you know, not to stop Mariano when you see him driving on Foothill Boulevard because he's a Mexican in a car that might have a broken taillight. You know, how do you translate that training that you must all think is effective and good, you know, but how do you get that down? So, you know, you don't have to answer now, but you know, there's got to be a way of some procedures, your own a set of implementation factors, you know, to get that training. Otherwise, you know, you'll be attending trainings for the next 20 years and, you know, and still looking for funding for it if it's not, you know, being implemented properly. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I'll answer it quickly, and then I can elaborate more later. But we do have, as DC Wong explained, we have what's called a PAS process. So if an officer, we do collect a lot of data here at OPD, and we analyze everything. If there's an officer, let's say, who recently received a lot of rudeness complaints, they would be then recommended for monitoring, which would then require his or her chain of command to develop strategies. A lot of them has to do with training, and from those strategies, there's measured results, as in, okay, 1 month from now or 3 months from now, after they receive this training, how is their behavior? And that requires a chain of command response. And that's how we measure success. So there's a constant feedback loop that's happening.
I see that we're at 7:26, and I want to try to honor that 7:30 stop time, but I also see that Jose had his hand up. Jose.
Yeah, I just wanted to read quickly something out of the proposed community policing policy talking about trainings. Trainings on the following topics shall include community presenters or community-based organizations, cultural diversity and competency, implicit bias, de-escalation, community relations and customer service, restorative justice principles, stress management, community harm topics, and harm reduction principles. The department will include the community even if these topics already have post-mandated curriculum. So again, I'm going back to the importance of community-driven input into training and how that affects culture change. I think that's the touchstone that should not be ignored, and I would emphasize that sort of training in the development of any new officer any new FTO, sergeant, lieutenant, etc. Thank you.
I'm going to take 5 minutes, go a little bit beyond 7:30 to talk a little bit about next steps. Sorry, I didn't want to deter or cut off the conversation. I am at this point kind of at the same loss that Nikki's question poses, which is, what is our recommendation going to be? What is the thing that is going to cause the transformative change, culture change that we're here to sort of suggest, to recommend, to move towards? I don't think that these meetings are going to be a solution, or are we going to find the solution, or are we going to, or nor that we are going to solve all of these problems within just a particular month. I do think that this is likely the start of a conversation, research, and avenues or areas to delve into, to do a deeper dive, because even though from a massive list of things that we wanted to talk about, we distilled it into 3 topics, we're still trying to figure out where exactly those recommendations, those really solid recommendations, where the department are, where or what they're going to be, how they exactly will create that culture change, and what sources or experts to bring together. But what I'm going to do is, by our next meeting, which is the 28th, have some write-ups about this discussion, have some areas of recommendations that maybe are a little bit more vague, or maybe are a little bit high level, and try to distill possible actions, possible steps forward, and take it back to this group and see, well, is it enough? Is it going to be the thing that we want? Is it just one step in the many? Whatever it may be. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it, and then we're going to see if what I'm able to produce in the next week is really up to what this ad hoc wants. We need more. We need to go back to the drawing board, whatever it may be. I'm going to try to integrate as much as we can, try to get it done, and then bring it back so that we can have some consensus around what it is that I draft. And as those of you who have worked with me before know, I have absolutely no commitment to what I write, and I'm happy to get your input on it and to have drafts, changes, suggestions. Just tell me to toss it all out and start over, whatever it is. I'm happy to do. I do think that as part of this, there are going to be decisions that are going to be made, whether that's by consensus, whether that's by the commissioners, whether that's, by consensus or by the commissioners, whatever it may be. And I want to also let people know that generally my process is that in a situation where there is not consensus, when there is sort of differing opinions as to what should happen, what should be written, etc., I try very much as possible to make sure that that particular vote, that particular opinion, that particular viewpoint is expressed, so that whoever's looking at this document down the line, whoever's looking at the decisions that are made, know that there was this other opinion out there, and so that they can consider it. Because what eventually will come out of this ad hoc is a recommendation to the police commission as to what areas of culture change that we want to sort of have the department start taking steps down towards making. What areas of changes, let me make sure I said that right. What areas of changes, or what specific changes and recommendations we want the department to make in order to start making that culture change that is being asked about by both the court, the judge, as well as our community. I know I've said a lot. I don't want to be the last word. Thoughts, questions, comments?
I just have a lot of gratitude for folks here, per usual. I think it takes a lot to have tension in the room and stay in the conversation, like one of our group agreements names. So I'm just appreciating the time everyone's spending. And Jesse, I know you're still in the men's, so just appreciating your time and leadership too.
Jose, thank you.
Yeah, just quickly, I just want to point out the distinction between an honest effort to create culture change by pushing the idea of ethics at the level of the candidates for FDOs, sergeants, etc., from a real aggressive, honest effort to root out the bad cops. I think Reggie again put his finger right on it, and that is who are the crazies in the locker room? Who are the fascists? Who are the cliques, the gang members? They exist. And when we had conversations back a few years ago about who were the white supremacists in OPD, and we had any number of meetings with the chief at that time, not much came of it. In fact, nothing came of it, despite the question on the table: who are the white supremacists and what is being done to get them out? They exist. They're there. The crazies are there. The cliques are there. The fascists are there. What's being done to root them out, identify them, and get rid of them? So I think that's really a distinct consideration from an honest effort to have the training, or I should say maybe the evaluation is a better word, of the candidates for these important positions such as sergeants, FDOs, etc. Those are two separate things, and I think we need to recognize that. Thank you.
Go for it.
Okay, so I just want to review the process as you explained it, Commissioner Shea. So you're going to do a draft. We're going to have discussion on the draft. There's going to hopefully, we reach consensus. If there's no consensus, the two commissioners will vote to move it along or not. If it is moved along, then it goes to the full police commission for approval, and the whole process with public comment, and then that's what gets sent to the CMC. Am I correct?
Yep. We're gonna have two more meetings, the 28th and then September 7th.
Yes, thank you.
I always try to add in just a little bit of awkward pause, just to give people space. Okay. Thank you all for the time, for the discussion. This was, although I know that we didn't solve or get to or really solidify, all we have are some vague directions. This discussion was very helpful, very illuminating, and I hope whatever it is that I will be able to draft, it will be representative of the discussion and actually draw from it and be able to take what we've discussed into real actionable recommendations. And if not, then we'll work on it some more. Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good night. Our next meeting is August 28th, Monday, 6 p.m.
Commissioner, you doing okay? You're not feeling well?
I'm fine. It's just last week, I think, was coming down with something. Yeah.
Do you still anticipate the September 7th public forum?
I think so. I need to coordinate with Kelly.
Okay, and
Probably
that may
do that.
address, Nikki's question.